Think of someone you have known for years, someone you would call a friend, or a colleague, or perhaps a family member, whom you later discovered was significantly different from the person you had believed them to be. Not different in some small and forgivable way, but genuinely different, holding views or motivations or patterns of behavior that had been present all along, running beneath the surface of every interaction, quietly shaping the relationship in ways you had not seen until something happened that made the invisible visible and left you with the unsettling question: how did I not see that? This experience, the discovery that someone was other than they appeared, is one of the most common and most disorienting experiences in the whole range of human social life. And yet most of us, most of the time, do not treat it as something that can be trained. We accept it as a kind of inevitability, a tax on the opacity of other human beings, and we move forward hoping that the next person will be more transparent. Baltasar Gracián, the 17th century Spanish philosopher who spent his life developing what we might call a science of human perception, would have found this resignation deeply unnecessary. He believed that people, however complex and however variable, move according to patterns shaped by their desires, their fears, their pride, and their insecurities, and that anyone willing to develop the capacity of careful observation could learn to read those patterns with a reliability that would transform their relationships and their decisions.
Night Wisdom Radio.
Tonight, we will explore one of the most practical and powerful subjects that Gracián ever addressed: the art of knowing people, and what it means to develop the kind of perceptual intelligence that allows you to understand those around you more clearly, more accurately, and more compassionately than the surface of their behavior alone would suggest. The foundation of Gracián's thinking on this subject is a distinction that sounds simple, but has enormous consequences when you begin to take it seriously. He distinguished between what people say and what people reveal. What people say is the conscious, curated, deliberate layer of communication, the words chosen with some degree of intention, shaped by the image the person wants to project, filtered through their sense of what is appropriate to the moment. What people reveal is everything else: the involuntary signals that accompany conscious speech, the patterns that emerge over time across many interactions, the things that the controlled surface layer cannot fully contain because they are coming from a deeper place than conscious intention can reach. Gracián believed that the skilled observer pays close attention to what is said, but pays even closer attention to what is revealed, and that the gap between those two things is almost always the most interesting and most informative part of any human encounter. The first of the observational skills he developed is what we might call the reading of patterns over time. A single encounter with a person gives you very little reliable information. It is too subject to the variables of circumstance, to the particular mood or pressure or performance that the person brought to that specific moment. But patterns across multiple encounters, the consistent themes that emerge when you have seen someone in a variety of situations, under a range of pressures, with different stakes and different audiences, those patterns are enormously revealing. Gracián paid particular attention to three kinds of patterns. the pattern of what a person is drawn toward spontaneously when no one is directing them and nothing is required of them. Because what we choose freely, without incentive or obligation, tells a great deal about what we genuinely value. The pattern of what a person consistently avoids, deflects, or changes the subject away from, because what we resist or evade reveals the terrain we consider dangerous or threatening to our image of ourselves. And the pattern of what produces genuine emotion, what makes a person light up or go quiet or become unexpectedly sharp, because emotion, even when controlled, tends to leak through in ways that point directly toward the things that matter most. These patterns, observed patiently across multiple encounters, give you something far more reliable than any self-description. Because people, whatever they may say about themselves, cannot sustain a performance indefinitely. They tire, they slip, they encounter situations that their rehearsed self-presentation was not prepared for. And in those unguarded moments, the real pattern emerges with a clarity that no deliberate disclosure could have provided. The second observational skill Gracián emphasized is what he called listening to what is not said. This is more nuanced than it might initially appear, because it is not simply about noticing silence, about observing that someone said nothing when they might have spoken. It is about developing a sensitivity to the shape of omission, to the subjects that are systematically absent from a person's conversation over time, to the names that are never mentioned, the experiences never drawn on, the categories of information that the person seems to have but never offers. In Gracián's world, what a courtier or colleague consistently omitted from their conversation was often as informative as everything they chose to include, because the choice of what to withhold is itself a choice, and choices have reasons, and reasons, when you learn to infer them, tell you a great deal about the person making them. There is also a related skill that belongs in this same territory: the reading of qualifications. When a person says something but immediately qualifies it, softens it, retreats from it, or adds an exception that seems to dilute the original statement, Gracián would direct your attention not to the statement, but to the qualification and to the anxiety that produced it. A qualification is almost always a form of self-protection. The person is saying something they feel compelled to say while simultaneously trying to limit its implications. And the thing they are trying to limit the implications of is usually the very thing that most deserves your attention. The third skill in Gracián's framework is what we might call the observation of behavior under pressure. A person's behavior in ordinary circumstances is a relatively unreliable guide to their character, because ordinary circumstances require very little of character. When things are going well, when the stakes are low, when everyone is comfortable and cooperative, almost anyone can appear reasonable, generous, and trustworthy. Character reveals itself under pressure, when things go wrong, when resources are scarce, when two people's interests genuinely conflict, when the person must choose between their stated values and their immediate self-interest. Gracián was particularly attentive to how people behaved toward those who had nothing to offer them, toward people of lower status, less power, or less usefulness. He believed that the treatment of the powerless was one of the most reliable indicators of character available, because it is in those interactions, where there is nothing to be gained and nothing to be feared, that the person's actual values are most clearly and most honestly expressed. A person who is warm and generous upward toward those who can help them, reward them, or judge them, but dismissive or careless downward, is telling you something very precise about the nature of their warmth, that it is not warmth at all, but strategy wearing warmth's clothing. The fourth dimension of Gracián's approach to knowing people is perhaps the most sophisticated and the most requiring of patience. He called it the study of what people need to believe about themselves. Every person carries a central self-narrative, a story about who they are, what they deserve, what they are capable of, and what role they play in the lives of the people around them. This self-narrative is not something they have necessarily examined consciously. It often operates below the level of deliberate thought, but it shapes their behavior with extraordinary consistency because almost everything a person does is at some level in service of maintaining and confirming the story they are telling about themselves. The person who needs to believe they are the wisest in the room will consistently steer conversations toward topics where this can be demonstrated. They will be disproportionately threatened by signs of intelligence in others and disproportionately generous toward signs of lesser understanding. The person who needs to believe they are uniquely burdened will find suffering in circumstances where others find manageable difficulty and will be resistant to the suggestion that their situation is ordinary, because the ordinariness would dissolve the specialness that the suffering provides. The person who needs to believe they are above the usual rules of social exchange will be consistently surprised when their behavior has consequences, because in their self-narrative, they occupy a category that those consequences were not designed to apply to. Gracián did not see this observation as a tool for cynicism. He was not suggesting that people are fundamentally manipulative or that self-narrative is inevitably a form of self-deception. He was suggesting that understanding what someone needs to believe about themselves is one of the most compassionate and most practically useful things you can know about them, because it allows you to interact with them in ways that work with their nature rather than against it, to offer them what they genuinely need in forms they can actually receive, and to predict with far greater accuracy how they will behave in the situations that matter most. Let us draw these strands together and consider what they point toward. The art of knowing people, as Gracián understood it, is not a cold or calculating enterprise. It is not the cultivation of a suspicious intelligence that approaches every human being as a problem to be decoded and a risk to be managed. It is, at its best, a form of genuine interest, a decision to take people seriously enough to look beneath the surface they present and try to understand the fuller, more complicated, more human reality that lies beneath it. It is the decision to become a better reader of the people you encounter, not to gain advantage over them, but to engage with them more honestly, to serve them more effectively, and to stop being surprised by behavior that, with enough attention, was always legible. The practice I want to offer you from tonight's reflection is simple and requires only consistency to develop. Choose one person in your life, someone you interact with regularly, someone whose behavior has sometimes puzzled or frustrated you, someone you would like to understand better. Over the coming week, practice Gracián's 3 observational disciplines with them. Notice what they are spontaneously drawn toward, what they talk about without being asked, what lights them up, what they return to again and again when given freedom to choose. Notice what they consistently avoid, deflect, or qualify, and ask yourself, without judgment, what that avoidance might be protecting. And observe as carefully as you can how they behave toward people who have nothing to offer them, because that behavior, more than almost any other, will tell you who this person actually is beneath the performance that circumstances and self-interest require. At the end of the week, sit with what you have observed and ask yourself whether your understanding of this person has shifted in any direction. You may find that it has deepened into greater appreciation. You may find that it has changed in a direction you were not expecting and needed to see. Either way, you will have practiced something that Gracián considered among the most valuable of all human disciplines: the capacity to see people clearly, which is simply another way of saying the capacity to see people truly. Tonight's reflection touches something that I believe most of us carry a genuine curiosity about: the question of what lies beneath the surface of the people we know. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which of Gracián's observational skills feels most natural to you, and which feels most difficult to practice without sliding into judgment? That tension is worth exploring. If you found value in tonight's episode, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe with notifications on, so the next night's reflection finds its way to you. Thank you for being here. Sleep wisely, reflect deeply, and look beneath the surface.